My first job I ever had was working at McDonald's. I got the job when I was a sophomore in high school and had recently turned 16. I lived in a fairly small town that was pretty quiet, but there was a McDonald's and a few other things. We lived in a neighborhood that was pretty close to the McDonald's. In fact, I lived only about a mile away from it. So when I first got the job, I would just walk to and from each shift. It would only take me about 15 minutes roughly to get there and back, and I didn't mind too much. I didn't really like walking back late at night though, because it always felt creepy, but I never really saw anything or had anything strange happen. I was a part-time worker and in high school, so most of my shifts would start in the afternoon and go until sometime at night. When I worked, most of the time I would be behind the counter taking people's orders. And this was before McDonald's had screens in the lobby where you can order at, so you actually had to order at the counter to another person. Most of the time at night, things would be pretty quiet, especially when it got to be later. One night I worked until like 9 or 10 p.m. When I got off work, as typical, I punched out and then left to walk home. I remember this night I got off the McDonald's property and began walking along the sidewalk. This went along the road that was kind of quiet. At night there would be hardly any cars, but during the morning or late afternoon it would get sort of busy. About 2 or 3 minutes into the walk on that sidewalk, I heard footsteps behind me. I don't think I had ever encountered anybody else out walking in my times going home to that point. It immediately made me a little nervous, but I told myself there was nothing. As I kept walking, I was hearing footsteps behind me the whole time. They were kind of a long ways back and seemed to be staying at about the same distance. Eventually, after maybe 5 more minutes, I had to turn right at that street and now go to a quieter one. In fact, this road did not even have a sidewalk on it, so I would just walk on it close to the curb. After a little while, I realized that the person behind me turned as well. At that point, I looked behind to see who it was. There was a man there, and I got a pretty good look at him. He seemed to be a little bit closer than before. It made me nervous because why would he turn at the same spot that I did? To make it home, I had to walk down this street, then take another left, walk for about 5 minutes, and then take a right to my street. After walking the rest of the way down that area, the man remained about the same distance back. When I turned, I looked at him again. He looked at me this time, but didn't say or do anything. I was pretty nervous now because he once more appeared to be slightly closer. I walked down that street, which did have a sidewalk, and the man turned there as well. Whether he was intentionally following me or not, I didn't know 100%, but what I did know is that I just wanted to get away from him. So long before my street, I turned and went down a random one. I started walking really fast as well. Without really giving it much thought, I just turned and walked into a driveway right away. The man had not made it around the corner yet. Then I went around the garage to that property and into the backyard. Most of the houses had a lot of trees in the backyard, as this area had lots of trees in general, so I was able to get out of the man's sight pretty well. I didn't stop around to see if he would come after me. Instead, I just cut through a few people's backyards and then went around a house and into the street on the other side. After that, I walked down that street and no longer saw the man. I very carefully walked the rest of the way back home, taking a different route. Thankfully, I made it back and did not see the man. I didn't know for certain if he had been following me or not, but it sure seemed like he was. I felt lucky to have made it back safely. By the next day, though, I had sort of forgot about it. A few days later, I was working another night shift again at McDonald's, with similar hours to before. I was behind the counter, and after a long time of working again, it got to be later and later at night. I remember that when it got to be about an hour left in my shift, the restaurant had no customers in it at all. Then the door opened, and I looked over and saw a man walking in. I instantly recognized him. It was the same man who had followed me home the other night. I was shocked. He casually walked up to the counter and then looked up at the menu. I was nervous and didn't know what to do. The man then proceeded to order as normal. I just took his order and kept it professional. I didn't ask him if he had followed me or anything like that. Being young, I didn't really know how to handle a situation like that, and maybe, just maybe, he happened to live in the same neighborhood as me and walked to McDonald's. So he stood around and waited, and soon his food was up. I gave it to him, and he walked over and sat down by himself in one of the booths. He was sitting kind of in the back corner of the restaurant, but he was facing me. Overall, he had been pretty quiet, didn't say too much, and was overall polite. As I stood there by the counter, the man sat there in the corner and slowly was eating. Eventually, someone else came in and ordered, but when they got their food, they left. They didn't stick around to eat. A while after that, we got another customer, but they too left. I was getting off work soon, but the McDonald's would still be open for a few more hours later. The man was still sitting in the corner, now done eating. He didn't leave though, he just continued to sit there. I started to wonder if he was waiting for me to leave and then was going to follow me again. As it got to be a few minutes from when I would clock out, I didn't know what I should do. My parents' only car was being used because my dad worked a lot of late nights. I wanted to ask one of my coworkers for a ride home, but nobody else got off at around the same time I did, so my only way of getting home was walking. I decided to just leave and hope for the best. When I finally got off, the man was still just sitting there in the corner by himself. I went and clocked out and then left the McDonald's. When I walked out the doors, I looked over and the man was still sitting there. It seemed as though possibly he was going to just keep sitting in the McDonald's. It was another very quiet night outside. I started walking down the sidewalk and thought that I was in the clear. However, within a minute, I heard the McDonald's door opening off in the distance. I looked back right away, and there he was, the same guy. I started walking really fast, and I was sure that he was following me. Now, to my left was the road, and to my right was this woods. On the other side of it, a ways back, was another neighborhood that connected to ours. It was like a 5-minute walk to get past the woods, and then turn right at that road without the sidewalk that I mentioned before. So, as I walked, the man's footsteps were moving sorta quick as well, and although he was a ways back, I knew that if he wanted to, he could catch up to me. I was a small 16-year-old girl, and this guy was like 6 feet tall. So I turned and decided to go into the woods. I just went right through the trees, and then started making my way through the tall grass, bushes, and tree branches. It was a very dense woods, and I could hardly see anything anymore. I walked into the woods a good ways, maybe like 20 or 30 feet, and then I stopped. The man no doubt heard me, and saw me go into the woods as well. I hid behind a tree, and looked out towards the sidewalk to see if the man would walk past. I could not really see to the sidewalk at all, just barely sort of. At first, I didn't hear anything, but I was sorta deep in the woods, so I couldn't hear much as well. Then, within a few seconds, I did hear the man walk to the area where I was, and then he stopped. Moments later, I heard him start to enter the woods. This really freaked me out. I turned and took off running. I ran the opposite way from where the man was, going as fast as I could. It seemed to get thicker and thicker in the woods with so many tree branches and stuff. After a while of running, I stopped and slowed down. I saw this huge bush, and I laid down and hid myself under it. I could hear the man walking off in the distance, but didn't know exactly where he was. I heard leaves being kicked around, and the man moving around. He was definitely looking for me. Still, he didn't say anything. Neither of us did. The man got closer, and I almost got up and took off running again, but I didn't. He then turned and went in another direction. After a few more minutes of hearing him walk around, he didn't get that close to me. He seemed to go off in another way. When I was no longer able to hear him, I got up and then ran to the left. This was the opposite direction of where the man had gone, and also the general direction of my house. I knew that this woods would connect with the neighborhood. I ran and ran through there, and then finally made it out. I was covered in leaves and scratches from the tree branches, but overall I was alright. At that point, I jogged the rest of the way back home, looking over my shoulder every 2 seconds. Thankfully, I made it back. This time, I told my mom right away, and she called the cops. They ended up going to the McDonald's and looking around and searching the woods too, but unfortunately, the man was gone. I'm not sure where he went, but he got away from there. When I worked from that point on, I always got a ride. One of our neighbors drove me and picked me up when my parents couldn't, because it was such a short drive for them. That was nice of them, and it may have saved me from getting followed again. Although I never saw that man in the McDonald's for the rest of the time that I worked there. He never came back to my knowledge, and I'm guessing that's because he knew that I knew he was following me after I ran into the woods. He probably figured out that I reported him, which was true. I'm mad that he didn't get caught for that. I worked at that McDonald's for a few more months and then got another job. That was by far the scariest thing to happen in my time there. I recently remembered something crazy that happened back when I was younger. I think I was like 12 years old, and I recall that my parents left me home alone one night, which turned out to be a mistake. We lived in a pretty average neighborhood, in my opinion, and I had been left home alone several times before, not a ton, but enough to make me feel comfortable being home by myself. I don't remember where my parents were going, but I know that it was nighttime. I was in my bedroom when out of nowhere the doorbell rang. So I left my room and went to go see who was there. When I got to the window, I saw a man standing on the front step. He was wearing a McDonald's hat and a McDonald's shirt, indicating that he worked there. At first, I remember I thought that he was delivering food. But looking back, that was stupid because I know that McDonald's does not deliver. Sure, you can get it delivered like on Uber Eats or stuff like that, but a McDonald's employee is not going to drive to your house like a pizza guy. And back at the time of this story, food delivery was mostly just for pizza. I, as a 12-year-old, didn't know that though, and despite there not being food in the man's hands, I walked over to the door. I just remember thinking that he probably was delivering to the wrong house and I needed to tell him that he was at the wrong place. So I went over and answered the door. When I opened it, he did not say that he had a delivery though. The guy said hi and asked if he could come in and use the phone. Right away, he seemed like a sketchy person when he was talking, and I even thought that, being a 12-year-old kid. The guy was skinny and overall looked kind of messy. He had greasy hair and a very patchy sort of beard, if you could even call it that. I knew that I probably should not let a stranger inside. I wanted to say no, but at first I did. I said no, but then the guy asked if he could just use the bathroom quick. He said that he would be really quick and then just leave. Now, I had no idea who he was or where he had come from or why he was at our door. I should have just slammed the door in his face, but instead, I did not. I told him that he could. I instantly felt stupid and regretted it. But I really thought that he was just going to use the bathroom and then leave. He entered the house and walked right past me and down the hallway. He walked really fast as well. He very quickly left the room and was gone out of my sight. The only problem is that he didn't even go where the bathroom was. In fact, he hadn't even asked me where it was at all. I stayed in the living room not knowing what to do. I waited for the man for a few minutes. After like 5 minutes had gone by and there was no sign of him or anything, I was getting worried. I walked over to where the bathroom was, and the door was open and the light was off. The man was not in there. I didn't know where he was. I nervously called out asking, but got no reply. Then I walked all around the house, but I didn't see him. I had no idea where he went. At that point, I got the phone and called my parents about it. When I told them what was going on, they told me to lock myself in my bedroom and said they were calling the police. So I did just that. When I was in my bedroom, I didn't hear anything at all. I had no clue if the guy was even still in our house, although I had never heard him leave or anything. So probably like 10 minutes later, the cops arrived. They entered the house and searched around for the man. He was found hiding in the basement. My parents got home a short time later. I'm not sure what the man's plan was. He was definitely sketchy though, and I don't really know what McDonald's had to do with this. He was just wearing a McDonald's uniform, but I remember hearing somebody say that he didn't even work there. I still feel stupid remembering it, knowing that I let him in the house. I obviously learned my lesson, but thankfully nothing like that happened again. When I was a kid, McDonald's was my favorite restaurant. They were all over town, and I obviously liked the Happy Meals back in the day as well. The closest McDonald's was less than a mile from our house. We lived kind of close to the city, and all you had to do was walk a few blocks to get to a lot of places. One time when I was 10 years old, I walked to McDonald's by myself. I remember that my mom must have been busy with something, but she told me that I could go. I'd walked to and from school before and a couple of other places like the library or a few stores, so this didn't seem like that big of a deal for me. I was just going to walk to McDonald's, get some food, and then bring it back home. To me, the hardest part would be ordering correctly and then getting my order. I left home and walked to McDonald's, which took maybe 10 minutes. After getting inside the restaurant, it was not too busy, but there were a number of other people there. I waited in line and then ordered and waited for the food. I remember that as I was standing around and waiting for my order, this man approached me. He asked me if I was there all by myself, and I said yes. I figured that he was maybe concerned for me. He asked me if I needed a ride, and I said no, I live really close by. He said okay, and then he left me alone. A couple of minutes later, my order was up, and I took it and started walking to leave. The man walked up to me again before I left the restaurant and asked me if I was sure I didn't need someone to drive me home. I told him yes, then I left. So I got out to the sidewalk past the McDonald's and was heading back home. I crossed the street and then walked a couple of blocks. I was about halfway back when I heard a car driving up the street that I was on. The car slowed down and then pulled over just in front of me. I saw that the same guy was driving. He told me that I should get in his car and he would drive me home. I told him that I was already almost home and I didn't have that much farther to walk. At that point, I remembered that the man just drove away. I thought that it was weird how he kept asking to drive me home, but I guess with me being a kid it might seem like I was lost or something. I walked the rest of the way back, which didn't take too long. However, I remember as I got home and was walking through the front yard, I looked back and saw the guy again. He was driving by real slow in his car once more. He didn't stop and ask me anything this time, and I walked up and entered the house and was glad to be back. But I looked out the window and saw him pull over for like a minute. Then he drove away. After that, I quickly forgot about him for the most part, but the memory ended up sticking with me. I never saw the guy again, but as I got older, the more I thought about it and realized how creepy it was. Was it just an over-concerned person who wanted to make sure that I got home safe, Or was he a potential kidnapper looking for an opportunity to kidnap me? I don't know for sure, but I'm hoping that it was not the latter. A couple of years ago, I had a really crazy experience at a local McDonald's. So, I live not too far away from a McDonald's. Actually, there's several that are pretty close by. It's one of my favorite late night places to get food from. I drove there one night at probably about 11 o'clock. It was late, but I was hungry. I expected things to be quiet with it being that hour, and it was. When I walked into the restaurant, there was nobody else around. I ordered on the screen in the lobby and then waited for the food. However, as I was waiting, I looked over and saw a man entering the McDonald's. He walked in and immediately went over to the counter. The man seemed angry and demanded to talk to someone. I was standing a ways away and moved back even farther. The guy started complaining about how the French fries were cold and some other stuff. He was talking loud and fast and was clearly very angry. An employee started talking to him, and they basically were arguing. This went on for maybe a minute or so. After going back and forth, the man then grabbed a cup and walked away to the drink machine. I thought that he was going to leave then. He went over and filled his cup with water. Then he walked back over to the McDonald's employee and threw the water in his face, splashing him. The employee was angry and started yelling and saying that he was going to call the cops and stuff. Then they went right back into arguing. After a short time of this, the man went back over to the drink machine. As this was happening, I heard other employees yell to call the cops. I was just standing there a few feet away, wanting to leave. I should have left, but I was still waiting for my order. When the man filled up his drink again, he started to walk back over to the counter. However, he stopped suddenly and looked over and seemed to notice me. I'm not sure if he even knew that I was there at all prior to that, but I had been literally right there the entire time. The man then said to me, "What are you looking at?" I said, "Nothing, I'm just waiting." He told me to stop looking at him, and then walked over and splashed me in the face with water. He then threw the cup down on the ground and went back over to the counter. I wanted to go over and punch him, but for a few seconds my reaction was delayed because I was not expecting him to do that at all. But the man didn't stick around. He gave the employees a couple final words and then walked out the door. I had started to go after him, but once he left the building, I stopped, thinking better of it. There was no sense in getting myself into trouble along with this lunatic. The cops got there a few minutes later. After that, my order was also done. I didn't stick around to see what would happen. I went home and didn't go back to that McDonald's for months. I'm not sure how the situation turned out, if the man got arrested or just told to leave or banned from the McDonald's or what, but I hope everything turned out all right. I know I was angry about it at first, but now, over time, I look back on it and laugh. In the moment, though, it was a really crazy scene, and I don't know what exactly that man could have been capable of. Many years ago, I was on my way home from work one night. It was really late, and I got off at probably around 11 o'clock or something like that. I just know that I was tired and hungry. On my drive home, I knew that the only place open this late would probably be McDonald's. Without giving it much thought, I drove until I saw a sign of McDonald's off the highway. I took the exit and then drove down a quiet road a little ways until I saw the building maybe a mile later. It was very quiet. I'm not sure if I had ever been to this McDonald's before. I was still a good 15 to 20 minutes from home. After pulling into the parking lot, I saw maybe 2 other cars. I parked my car, got out, and then walked inside. When I did though, I walked up to the counter and nobody was around. There was no one standing there ready to take my order. I thought that I heard voices coming from somewhere in the back, but I couldn't make out any words, and I couldn't see them either. But I knew there were people here. I wasn't all too surprised. Sometimes late at night when places are slow and quiet, people aren't always manning the registers. Also, they might only have a couple of people working at once with it being so late. So I just stood there by the counter and waited. I looked up at the menu, but I already knew what I wanted. Just a classic number 1, the Big Mac meal. So I stood around, and probably another minute or 2 went by. I was starting to get impatient. I wasn't going to walk behind the counter or anything, but I looked around to see if I could see where anybody was. I could not. I called out hello, hoping that somebody would hear me. At first, nothing happened, but then I heard somebody walking over. Seconds later, I saw a man come around the corner, but it was not a McDonald's worker. This guy was wearing black pants, a black sweatshirt, and a black ski mask, covering everything but his eyes. Instantly, I was caught off guard. It took my brain a few seconds to register what was going on. The man started to walk along the counter to go around it as if he was going to walk towards me. It was then that I felt like I should get out of there. I backed up and then just sprinted for the doors. The man in the ski mask actually started to run after me. Thankfully, I was able to get out the doors and leave the restaurant. I sprinted for my car, unlocked it, and went inside. The man did not chase me, but stayed by the door in the McDonald's. When I was in my car, I drove away from there and then I called the police. I told them that I thought the McDonald's was being robbed. Then I drove back home. I found out later more details about what had happened. It turned out that the McDonald's that I went to was actually supposed to be closed at that hour, and it was in fact being robbed. Several masked men had entered just before the place closed. They forced the 3 employees still working to go into the back. Then they made them give them all the money and were trying to get them to open the safe. I walked in right in the middle of their crime because obviously the doors didn't get locked. I'm not sure what would have happened if I had not just left right away. I don't think that the masked man was approaching me to make me a hamburger. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, and the criminals were apprehended. The McDonald's opened again shortly after, but I haven't been there since.